It is with hope for the success of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit and its meaningful progress for mankind and the environment that we start today's Green Future session on biodiversity. This session was jointly organized by the Ministry of Environment in the Republic of Korea and the National Institute of Biological Resources under the title of Hope for the Future, Biodiversity Restoration. My name is Tyler Roche, and I will be the moderator for this session. We have prepared this session in an online format to reach a wider audience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. There are numerous environmental challenges that we are facing around the world today, with one of those being the loss of biodiversity. I believe now is the time to take a moment to better understand what biodiversity is and why it matters to everyone. Before we move any further, we have a special clip prepared for you. Check it out. It is both alarming and heartbreaking to see that biodiversity is declining at an unprecedented rate. To help us deeply understand this topic, I would like to invite today's keynote speaker, who has a profound understanding of climate change and biodiversity loss. I have the honor to welcome the 8th UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, who is currently the President of the Assembly and the Chair of the Council of the Global Green Growth Institute. Today, Mr. Ban will touch upon why we need everybody's participation for the restoration of biodiversity, and a keynote for the Green Future session on biodiversity.
Dear colleagues, all participants joining us online, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and privilege to address this special session of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit on climate change response and biodiversity recovery. I find this session highly timely and relevant, noting that biodiversity loss is considered one of the greatest challenges that threaten the very existence of humanity. According to the 2020 IPBES Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services pandemic report, around 68% of wildlife varieties have been reduced, and about 25% of species are at risk of going extinct. If this trend continues, 1 million species could be wiped out of the planet within decades. Scientists have warned that biodiversity loss would eventually lead to humanity's extinction. We are still in the midst of an unprecedented upheaval caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is a clear sign of what humanity could face as a result of biodiversity loss and ecological destruction. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the newly emerging viruses are the warnings from outraged nature to humanity. The best vaccine for disease prevention would be response to climate change, coupled with biodiversity recovery. During my tenure as United Nations Secretary General, I strive for the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, both of which were successfully adopted in 2015. Under the motto of "Leave no one behind," the 17 goals span around the areas of 5 Ps, people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. Nonetheless, without innovative change in the lifestyle dependent on fossil fuels, biodiversity and ecosystem will continue to diminish, hindering our progress towards SDGs. Waning biodiversity makes the agricultural ecosystem more vulnerable to and less resilient against pathogens and harmful insects threatening the food security and nutrition of the world's population. Take goal number 2, zero hunger, for example. Loss of insect pollinators led to the decline in annual crop production of worth $235 to $577 billion US dollars. Around 10% of the mammals used in agriculture and food production had gone extinct by 2016. At least 1,000 species are on the verge of extinction. Biodiversity is also closely linked to goal number 13, climate change, climate action. According to the 2020 global biodiversity outlook, the ecosystem absorbs 60% of global carbon emissions annually. Mangroves help prevent storms and coastal erosion, while forests in cities reduce urban heat island effects. All this clearly demonstrates that disrupting the ecosystem's self-purification ability will only exacerbate the climate crisis. We urgently need to come up with nature-based solutions to protect our ecosystem and restore biodiversity for all living creatures on Earth to coexist in harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, now is time to take action. We are at an inflection point to build back better for a sustainable and resilient future. Most importantly, for our future generations. In this respect, I'd like to highlight 3 elements in our quest for a green recovery. First, climate change and biodiversity degradation should be addressed in an integrated manner. The key treaties designed to tackle these challenges are the Paris Agreement and the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have to take note that the 2 treaties are mutually complementary and also crucial to each other's success. Preserving biodiversity requires climate action, and climate change cannot be tackled without ensuring biodiversity. Thus, we need to prepare well-designed nature-based solutions and embrace biodiversity as an essential element to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Secondly, we should adopt more ambitious goals and policy roadmaps. More than 120 countries have announced or reviewed carbon neutrality goals to limit global temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050. It is noteworthy that the Biden administration decided to rejoin to the Paris Agreement on the day of inauguration. This bold decision of the US will encourage international community to better implement the International Climate Agreement with enhanced momentum. In addition, a number of countries, including Korea, United States, and Japan, have announced their goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. China also declared its goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. In order to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, we need an all-hands-on-deck approach based on the social consensus and a clear policy roadmap for implementation. While pushing forward coal phase-out and transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to eco-friendly cars and from fossil fuels to renewables, we must devise a mid to long-term policy to achieve carbon neutrality. In spite of enhanced actions on climate change, little progress has been made on biological diversity. Most of the goals set by the Convention on Biological Diversity have yet to be met, despite the fact that the parties to the CBD have committed to detailed targets, such as the expansion of nature reserves and the adoption of sustainable fishing practices. In this respect, I look forward to CBD's post-2020 targets that reflects the 5 elements of SMART, standing for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. This process will require international cooperation in coping up with a more ambitious target and concrete plans for implementation. Lastly, while governments and the international community have roles to play, all other stakeholders should work hand in hand to restore and preserve biodiversity and respond to climate change. To bend the curve of biodiversity loss, which is indispensable for sustainable development and future generations' very survival, all global citizens must partake in changing their production practices and consumption patterns. Good examples would be changing of consumption and purchasing behaviors and cutting down on food waste. Such small actions made by all of us can make a big difference in protecting the living beings on Earth and tackling climate change. This is why the P4G Seoul Summit is all the more significant, since it engages governments, businesses, and civil society and supports public-private partnership projects. I truly hope that the summit will instill the importance of biodiversity in more people and bring them on board in the efforts to leave the beautiful Earth and its wildlife to our future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have stressed on various occasions, let us remember that there is no planet B, and therefore no plan B. We have to listen carefully to Mother Nature's warnings. We cannot negotiate with nature. This may be our only chance to turn the tide. We must achieve sustainable development through social and economic paradigm shift. Let us act on it now, not only for us, but for our future generations. I look forward to all the countries around the world achieving greater unity and solidarity for our long journey of climate action. Thank you.
It's clear that the issue of biodiversity has not received the attention that it deserves or requires. That's why we have to act now. So on that note, let's move into the presentation segment of our session. I will open the floor to presenters who are committed to biodiversity and environmental conservation. Before we move on, I would like to take a moment to share with you a special video message that we received from a world-renowned primatologist and anthropologist, Dr. Jane Goodall. She has deep compassion for both humans and animals and our shared environment, having spent nearly 40 years studying and living among chimpanzees in the wild. Here's what she had to say.
Hello everyone, this is Jane Goodall, and first I want to thank you for inviting me to take part in this really important gathering. It was when I was in the rainforest in Tanzania studying chimpanzees that I really learned firsthand about the interrelationship of all species of animals and plants in that ecosystem, and learned how each one had a role to play in that complex tapestry of life that we call biodiversity. And I learned how the extinction of even a small, seemingly insignificant species, in some cases, can have a ripple effect that can lead to ecosystem collapse. I think you'll all agree that at the present time, our planet is facing really serious problems. The twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change are just two of them, but they're the main ones. So it's really important that we understand that we too are part of the natural world. We're not separate from it, and we depend on it for clean air, water, food, everything, really. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. So it's clearly of great importance that we work hard to protect existing intact areas of the natural world and attempt to restore damaged ecosystems. After all, it's our disrespect of the natural world that's led to climate change and biodiversity loss. We can't expect to have unlimited global economic development on a planet of finite natural resources, which in some places are being used up faster than nature can replenish them. At the same time, there's a growing human population along with our livestock. Fortunately, there are more and more organizations today working on creating a more sustainable relationship with the natural world. And nature is amazingly resilient if we give her a chance. Places that have been utterly destroyed, such as an abandoned quarry or a terribly polluted river or lake, can, with time and sometimes some help, once again begin building up the biodiversity that's needed to make up a healthy ecosystem. At one time, the little Gombe National Park, where for 60 years I and my team have been studying chimpanzees, was part of the great forest belt that stretched across equatorial Africa. That's how it was in 1960 when I began. But by the late 1980s, Gombe was just an isolated patch of forest surrounded by completely bare, treeless hills. People living there in poverty had cut down those trees in desperate effort to find new soil for growing crops to feed their growing population or for charcoal to get some money. So in 1994, the Jane Goodall Institute began working with the villagers, helping them find ways of living without destroying their environment, helping to lift them out of poverty. And today, there are no more bare hills. Part of that program that was really important was education, environmental education. Today, trees and other vegetation have grown from seeds that were lying dormant under the soil. And areas of land around the park have been set aside by the villagers as a buffer zone between the chimpanzees and people. And along with the vegetation, animal species have recolonized the area, moving out from the park and providing that biodiversity that is so important. And land has also been set aside to allow the isolated chimpanzees to once again have interaction with other remnant groups and thus prevent the danger of inbreeding. Finally, I'm really encouraged by the growing number of rewilding programs that are becoming very successful in some countries. For example, huge areas have been set aside as a result of cooperation between different European countries, and some animal species that have been extinct for years and years have been successfully reintroduced. It's so important to share stories of success because that gives people hope that we can turn things around before it is too late. We must get together now and each play our part. Thank you so much.
Dr. Goodall's message really makes you think again about our relationship with nature and what we need to do to better conserve it. So now let's move into our discussion session here. I'd like to welcome now our panel that we have here today. First is Professor Choi Jae-chun from Ewha Women's University. Professor Choi is a prominent scholar in the field of biology. We also have Mr. Yoon Jong-soo. Mr. Yoon is the former Vice Minister for the Environment and the current President of the IUCN National Committee in the Republic of Korea. We also have Mr. Hong Jong-ho. Professor Hong is the co-chairman of the Korea Federation for Environmental Movements. And while he personally has a background in economics, he is currently a professor at the Seoul National University's Graduate School of Environmental Studies. And then we also have our civilian representative, Mr. Lee Jong-hyun. Mr. Lee is a YouTuber working with Sandbox and does content related to nature and the environment. So last but not least, of course, we have everyone online joining with us today from all around the world. So you're very much welcome to this segment. And without further ado, I will invite to the podium Professor Choi Jae-chun to shed light on a timely topic during the pandemic, the relationship between the pandemic and the need to restore the balance in biodiversity.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Let me talk about COVID-19 and biodiversity restoration. You all know that already 150 million people have been infected and more than 3 million people have died. This is simply incredible. Now, we learned that this has something to do with climate change. Earlier this year, researchers from Cambridge University and their colleagues have published a paper that says in the last 100 years, there have been shift in bat distribution. Many tropical bats are moving into temperate regions. Now, they discovered a new hotspots of bat diversity. Among them is southern China. They have learned that at least 40 new species have moved into southern China from tropical area. You all know that each bat carries maybe 2 or 3 different types of coronavirus. So when you put together, you can easily imagine that more than 100 new strains of coronavirus have moved into southern China. And that perhaps is the reason why we're suffering this incredible disaster. Earlier on, I defined this event as a blue ocean using business administration terminology. You all know that blue ocean is an incredibly attractive market because there aren't that many competitors in the market yet. I call this blue ocean because if you look at it from a virus point of view, this is an incredible opportunity because they're having great time. Now, let's go back to about 10,000 years. Back then, we were almost nothing. We were not a very abundant species. Perhaps a few individuals were roaming around on African plains. When we calculate the biomass of entire human species back then, and then add some of the animals we carry around, dogs and cats, even then, we were less than 1% of the biomass of mammals and birds at the time. But within the last 10,000 years, we went through agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, and we exploded in terms of numbers. Now, if you calculate that once again, in May 2021, you have to do, let's say, 7.8 billion times 62 kilograms maybe. That will give you the figure for the biomass of the human species. And then we have to add to it the domestic animals we carry these days, cattle and pigs and chickens and whatever. Depending upon where you draw a line of domesticated animals, the figure could shift quite a bit. Now the scientists have come up with a figure that is at least 96% to 99%. That's an incredible inversion. we were less than 1%, but now we're pushing all other animals into 1 or few percent, and then we are covering the entire surface of this planet. So if you are a virus or bacteria living on wild animal and suddenly decided to move to a new host, you jump out of wild animal and landed on something, chances are that's a human being or the domestic animals that a human being grows. This is what's happening right now. So I'm sorry to tell you a bad news, which is this is not the end of it. We'll probably go through this kind of pandemic again and again, unless we reduce our numbers tremendously, or we reduce our domestic animals tremendously, or we increase the area of forest or wild ecosystem so that wild animals can live comfortably. But that's not going to happen. Then chances are we're going to suffer this kind of pandemic, epidemics again and again, and probably much more frequently. Now, I write newspaper columns. I actually have done for more than 25 years. I wrote some silly article called Advocate for Migratory Birds. They are very upset because whenever avian flu breaks out, our government always points finger at migratory birds. They think the migratory birds are carrying the virus and give it to our chickens and ducks. That's probably not true. They carry, but they don't really transfer them to the domestic animals we grow. I had to write the same kind of article again, Advocate for Wild Boars, because of African swine disease. We're killing the wild boars out in the mountain these days. Now, it's not the problem of wild animals. The problem is the way we grow, the way we cultivate our animals. We reduce their genetic diversity tremendously. So they're almost like cloned animals. So one animal is infected, the other ones will get almost automatically. And then we don't let them have social distancing. We grow them in factory setting. And that's why once 1 or 2 animals got infected, the problem is incredible. Now, if you are a science addict, you probably have read Selfish Gene. The much of the theoretical background for that book has come from the great late William Hamilton. The Hamilton has said in his article somewhere, that nature abhors pure stands. What does that mean? Nature never becomes pure. Nature always diversifies. You are hearing these days the coronavirus has many variations. British variation, South African variation, now in India, and the variation creates variations. It's almost in cycle. The problem is we are going against the stream of nature. Nature always diversifies, but we always kills diversity. And I think this is the one we have to learn from Pope Francis. Pope Francis, in 2019, I think it was November, has declared that ecological sin as original sin. What that means is we are all created by God, according to the Pope, but then among the creatures, we think we're strong so that we are killing other creatures. God wouldn't be pleased. So he defined this as original sin. Now, if we listen to Pope Francis, this kind of disaster wouldn't have happened. Let me summarize what happened until now. I'm sorry to say this, but we are extremely lucky this time because it used to take 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine and supply. But this time, we came up with a very good vaccines within a year. So we're very lucky, thanks to life science. But we can't be lucky all the time. So I created 2 other vaccines, which are behavior vaccine and eco vaccine. We wash hands very nicely, and then we cover our mouth with a mask, and then we keep the social distance. These are the kind of things we can do behaviorally to protect ourselves from virus. That's behavior vaccine. There's even better vaccine, that's eco vaccine. If you somehow keep the virus from coming from natural environment to human system, this kind of thing would never happen. I hope we keep these 2 vaccines in hands and become a better world, become a living in the better world. So I say we need to give up the calling ourselves Homo sapiens, wise human being, and we are somehow reborn as a Homo symbios, the one who shares the planet Earth with other living organisms. I think we need to embrace ecological turn if we wish to live on this planet for a longer period of time. Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is Mr. Yoon Jong-soo. Having overseen Korea's environmental policies in his former capacity as the Vice Minister for the Environment, he currently heads the IUCN National Committee in the Republic of Korea. He will share with us practical solutions to environmental protection and biodiversity loss by drawing from his experience in the public sector, as well as working with international organizations.
Thank you, Tyler. We have paid a lot of attention to climate change issue, but not that much to biodiversity loss, even though loss of biodiversity is a key agenda for achieving the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals for the Republic of Korea. In the last few decades, urban areas have expanded and it greatly reduced natural habitats for animals and plants. And we have witnessed a drastic loss in biodiversity. In the past 20 years, the forest cover has decreased by 2.1%, agricultural land by 16%, wetlands has decreased by 20%. In terms of meeting the 2020 Aichi target adopted by CBD, Korea is far short in meeting the target for protected area. CBD has recommended 17% of terrestrial lands to be designated as protected area by 2020. However, Korea has yet to surpass 12%. As a response to your question, I'd like to highlight a few points that we should focus in fostering actions in nature conservation in Korea as well as in the world. First is uptaking nature-based solutions, or NBS. A key strategy to address climate change and biodiversity loss at the same time is NBS, a concept which was first created and developed by IUCN. IUCN has been collecting and sharing how countries and communities are incorporating NBS in their national policies. You can find the best practices of NBS in the webpage of IUCN. Second, we need to make a great stride in reaching the protected area target, both in terms of quantity and quality of protection for these special areas. IUCN has been promoting the green list of protected areas, which is the first global standard of best practice for area-based conservation. One innovative way to meet this goal is the National Trust Scheme, which is already adopted in the developed countries. One of our IUCN Korea member has driven this initiative. This is a grassroots land purchasing program. For example, general people or companies can donate some money for purchasing the land or forest to prevent the undesirable development. It has been successfully launched in 2007 in Korea. So far, it has been able to ensure 1,000 hectares of ecologically important areas to set aside for the future generation. Third, we need to introduce quantity-based approach to nature, like setting a cap in carbon emissions. Each municipality can set a legally binding quantity target on natural land cover. When there is loss of natural cover in one area, the municipality must offset by transforming other lands into a natural cover. Jeju Island, which is a member of IUCN Korea, has been leading the introduction of such a scheme, and we look forward to other municipalities to adopt such innovative policy. Finally, we need to promote citizen scientists. Science or research has been recognized as the work to be done only by scientists or researchers. However, through the development of IT, information technology, science or research is no longer a domain for only scientists or experts. Recently, thanks to mobile technology, we can easily get access to information on animals, flowers, and trees. This allows people to become closer and better understand nature. Anyone can collect and share scientific data and eventually upgrade the database. Therefore, I'd like to encourage anyone to become so-called citizen scientist. Thank you.
Professor Hong Jong-ho is a renowned environmental activist and a pioneering scholar in environmental economics. He will discuss sustainable use of biodiversity from the perspective of environmental economics.
Thank you, Tyler, for your kind introduction. Many people think that nature conservation and economic development are incompatible. Economic growth inevitably leads to environmental degradation, while ecosystem conservation requires limited economic development. But such dichotomy is misleading. Ecosystems need to be well managed and conserved to ensure sustainable economic activity and growth. I would like to highlight two key research findings that support this claim. The first is a paper titled Environmental Preservation, Uncertainty, and Irreversibility by Nobel laureate in economics Kenneth Arrow, and then UC Berkeley professor Anthony Fisher. The article suggests that when development has an irreversible impact on the environment, it could lead to a reduction in economic benefits that nature can provide at some point in the future. For example, suppose we can extract an anti-cancer substance from a specific animal or plant. If a development project destroys the ecosystem, we could lose a chance to develop life-saving drugs. Arrow and Fisher argue that when a project involves uncertainty and irreversibility, conservation is a better option than development. For now, the project would be pushed back for a specific period of time, during which additional information can be obtained about the uncertain situation. This process could form the basis for making reasonable decisions in the future. Arrow called the value of the information gained from the delayed action quasi-option value. The bigger the quasi-option value, the more reasonable it is to choose conservation over development. The second one is a 1997 paper published in the highly prestigious scientific journal Nature called The Value of the World's Ecosystem, Services, and Natural Capital. In this paper, Robert Costanza and other ecological economists asked a bold question. what is the annual worth of the services that Earth's ecosystems provide? The paper drew a great deal of attention and debate and has been cited more than 25,000 times since its publication. Ecosystem services that Earth provides included supply of oxygen, greenhouse gas regulation, flood control, drought, recovery, supply of agricultural and fishery products, wood and fuels, tourism and leisure. The value of global ecosystem services was estimated to be around 33 trillion US dollars per year in 1994 US dollar, with marine ecosystem accounting for the largest share at 20.9 trillion US dollars. Given that global GNP at that time was $18 trillion, the paper suggests that the benefits Earth's ecosystem provides are worth almost 2 times the income that humans created for themselves. The article sparked much controversy, but this does not change the fact that natural ecosystems provide enormous benefits to mankind. As you can see from the 2 research findings, our ecosystem and economy are closely related to each other. Unfortunately, humans have destroyed ecosystems and biodiversity to pursue economic growth for a long time. This is a short-sighted approach, which will most likely to have an adverse impact on the quality of life and eventually economic growth. Therefore, we need to clearly understand the potential negative impacts on biodiversity caused by massive public development projects or business activities polluting the environment. Efforts are needed to transform the way we conduct economic activities to ensure coexistence of humans and ecosystems. Such efforts are considered essential for the true sustainable development of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your presentations. It's very clear that we have a lot to do in terms of conserving and restoring biodiversity, especially in order to achieve our global goals for 2030. So at this point, I'd like to slowly move into some questions so we can have more of a discussion. But I do know that our civilian representative, Mr. Lee, you run a YouTube channel that is basically presenting a lot of content relating to wildlife and animals, and I know that you're very interested in the topic. So do you have any questions for our presenters today?
Zoonotic disease mostly remained endemic in the 20th century, but as we move further into the 21st century, we are seeing the emergence of genetic diseases that are pandemic, such as COVID-19. What do you think are some of the factors driving this trend?
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. I think it's primarily a matter of frequency. In the 20th century, you know that the Spanish flu broke out in 1918, but then we had a few incidences of cholera and a few others. And when we go back and look at the interval of outbreaks, it's about 20 to 30 years. But then as soon as we moved into 21st century, now SARS came out in 2003, and then MERS, Ebola, Zika, and all kinds of avian flu and swine flu, and then now COVID-19. We looked back, it's almost 2 or 3 years interval we're having these diseases. But then not all endemics have to become pandemic. There's a human aspect. I think in this case, the case of COVID-19, perhaps we failed in initial quarantine and somehow this became a worldwide event in a way. So it's important that we understand the frequency getting greater, but that means that we have to really be prepared against this kind of occurrences. I think that's most important aspects.
I also actually have a question. I have a question for Mr. Yoon, actually. In your presentation, you mentioned nature-based solutions, NBS. And I think this is fascinating, but I just haven't seen it in policy, really. So why isn't NBS more emphasized in national policy as an approach to solving the climate crisis?
There can be many reasons why NBS is not well reflected in national policy, but the bottom line is the lack of political will. Biodiversity agenda in many countries are not on the top of its national policy priorities. They say manufacturing industry is more important. They say there are many more important things. This is the general perception. Today we are saying that the biodiversity is very important. Biodiversity and climate change are said to be closely linked. It is true that climate change and biodiversity loss are already suffering planetary boundary crisis. We have to take urgent actions. There is a saying that political will is like an elephant in the room, which means anyone can know because it's huge, but no one wants to make a comment on that because it is very sensitive. Therefore, we need to continue to urge our political leaders to incorporate a biodiversity agenda as well as climate change agenda together in all major national policies in all sectors.
So it wouldn't be fair if we're the only ones asking the questions. P4G is all about partnerships, right? So let's see who we can get. Who online has a question for any of our presenters today? Do any of you have a question you'd like to ask?
Yeah, actually I do. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I also like to thank Professor Ng for his wonderful presentation. So my name is Awal Samuel, a graduate student at Chungbuk National University in Korea. So my question goes like this. Whenever we're given a choice between environment and development, we usually go for development. And I think this might have led to the degradation of biodiversity that we're seeing today. So I wonder if it is possible to strike a balance between environmental conservation and economic growth. For instance, I'm aware that there have been research efforts to reduce carbon emissions. So when these research findings are translated into commercial applications, how will it affect the industry?
It is a good question. As you have said, humans have consistently put development before the environment throughout the history. As a result, we are now faced with climate crisis and biodiversity degradation, which in turn are threatening human survival and sustainability, creating a vicious circle. To tackle this challenge, we need to change the distorted way we carry out economic activities. We need to shift from a carbon-based economy to a carbon-free economy. Economists favor carbon pricing as the most effective way to achieve decarbonization and carbon neutrality. Emission trading system and carbon tax are considered two main types of carbon pricing. Carbon pricing will encourage industries and businesses to use less fossil fuel. More stringent carbon tax and emission trading system will further cut down the consumption of fossil fuel while increasing the use of renewable energy sources. At the moment, Korea and the EU are providing incentives to businesses to reduce carbon emission using emission trading system. EU even plans to introduce a carbon border adjustment mechanism. A new economic order is on the horizon, where businesses and industries that reduce carbon emissions will have a competitive advantage in the global market.
Now we're going to connect to Antarctica to hear from the field. Once a pristine environment, Antarctica is now under significant threat from global climate change. The Republic of Korea has set up the King Sejong Station and the Changbogo Station in the Antarctic as a part of its Antarctic research mission to identify solutions to the environmental challenges we're facing. It also designated Penguin Village near the King Sejong Station as an Antarctic specially protected area to ensure the conservation of many species in the area. To find out more, Minister of the Environment Han Jong-ae connects live to the King Sejong Station in the Antarctic.
안녕하세요. 환경부 장관 한정혜입니다.
예, 안녕하십니까.
남극이 춥죠? 여기는 이제 약간 여름을 향해서 가는, 봄은 지나고 여름을 향해서 가고 있는데 거기 지금 날씨는 어떤가요?
현재 남극은 겨울로 접어드는 기간입니다. 기온이 영하로 떨어져 많이 춥고 바람도 많이 불고 있습니다. 며칠 전에는 블리저드가 불어서 눈이 2m가 넘게 쌓이기도 하였습니다.
건강 조심하셔야 될 것 같습니다. 우리가 이제 세종과학기지 설립된 이후로 굉장히 많은 연구 진행하고 계신데 혹시 지금까지 관련한 연구 성과 또 향후 우리 세종기지가 맡은 역할에 대해서 더 확대해야 되는 것 이런 것들 어떤 것이 있을까요?
네, 세종과학기지에는 남극의 특수한 생태 환경과 그곳에서 살아남은 생물들을 연구하고 있습니다. 남극에만 사는 생물들을 남극 고유종이라고 하는데 이곳에서 여러 차례 고유종들을 발견한 바 있습니다. 2014년도에 찾은 요강류에는 킹 세종 제네시스라는 이름을 붙이기도 하였고 우주 최강 생물로 알려진 물곰이라는 신종도 발견하였는데 앞으로 이 종의 생태적 유전적 특성을 밝혀낸다면 다양한 산업 분야 및 관련 연구에 기여할 것으로 생각합니다. 또한
기대가
극한
큽니다.
환경에 적응한 생물들의 유전자에는 화장품이나 의약품으로 활용할 수 있는 특성들이 존재하여 관련 연구도 진행 중에 있습니다. 세종기지가 앞으로 할 일들이 많겠지만 지구 온난화 속에서 생물 다양성을 보호하고 남극을 남극답게 지키는 것이 가장 중요한 일 중 하나라고 생각합니다.
네, 생물 다양성 말씀해 주셔서 안 그래도 지금 이제 기후위기, 기후변화가 시작되고 난 뒤에 특히나 척추동물의 경우에는 종 다양성이 굉장히 지금 뭐랄까요, 많이 축소되고 있어서 기존에 있었던 척추동물의 한 3분의 1 정도는 지금 사라지고 있다라고 하는 데이터도 나오고 있는 것 같습니다. 지금 말씀하신 것처럼 기후위기에 특히나 이제 영향을 많이 받는 것이 북극, 남극 이런 것들을 우리가 뉴스로는 많이 접하고는 있는데 실제로 해상의 빙하가 막 녹고 있다고 하는데 이 심각한 그 정도가 어느 정도인가요?
예, 맞습니다. 남극의 전체 빙하를 떠받치고 있는 해상 빙하가 소멸되면 남극 대륙 내부의 빙하마저 더 빠른 속도로 사라지기 때문입니다. 지구 온난화가 진행되면서 대기 및 해수 온도의 상승으로 엄청난 양의 빙하가 소멸되고 있는데 이는 정말 심각한 상황입니다.
또 이제 남극의 우리 세종과학기지에는 특히 우리 이제 환경부가 관리하고 있는 펭귄 마을이 있죠. 사실 한국에는 그 펭수라고 굉장히 인기 있는 연예인이 있는데 들어는 보셨는지 모르겠어요. 멀리 남극에서 아이돌이 되기 위해서 한국까지 온 펭수도 있긴 합니다만 실제 이런 지금 팬데믹 상황에서 특히 이제 바이러스가 창궐을 하고 있고 이런 상황이라서 혹시 우리 펭귄 마을에는 영향은 없는지 궁금하기도 합니다.
예, 남극에는 펭귄을 포함하여 다양한 종류의 조류가 살고 있고 조류의 코로나 바이러스도 발견된 적이 있지만 다행히 아직까지는 심각한 바이러스는 발견되고 있지 않습니다. 남극 생태계를 보존하기 위해서는 남극 펭귄들과의 접촉을 최대한 줄이는 것이 중요하다고 생각합니다. 또한 펭귄의 먹이인 크릴새우가 감소하고 있는데 이는 인간의 무분별한 남획 때문인데요. 크릴새우의 무분별한 남획을 막기 위한 노력도 필요하다고 생각합니다.
네, 정말 수고를 많이 해주시고 계신데 저희들도 여기서 할 일이 좀 많겠지요. 혹시 세종과학기지에 계시면서 한국에서 이런 것들은 좀 해주셨으면 좋겠다라고 하는 바람 같은 거 있으면 말씀해 주시고요. 또 앞으로도 계속 수고를 해주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
네, 남극에 대한 지속적인 관심 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다. 건강관리 잘 하십시오.
네, 고맙습니다.
It's always good to hear news from our researchers who are out there in the field, but it is a bit disheartening to hear about what is happening to the Antarctic. It seems that virtually no area is safe from the impact of climate change. Meanwhile, international organizations have long played a key role in raising public awareness in biodiversity issues and encouraging people to take action. Representatives of international organizations have sent special messages to P4G's Green Future session on biodiversity. The first one is from Executive Secretary of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, a multilateral treaty signed by over 160 countries to address the biodiversity crisis and global environmental challenges.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the government of the Republic of Korea for inviting me to deliver this message. It is an honor to speak to you today during the Green Future Week as a pre-event to the leaders' session of the P4G Seoul Summit. As you discuss solutions for green economic growth and seek to find and promote innovative partnerships at scale to deliver on sustainable development goals, I would like to take this opportunity to reinforce a message that has become loud and clear. Nature is the foundation of sustainability. Scientists, policymakers, and the international community now recognize that sustainable development relies on healthy and resilient ecosystems. Food and agriculture, water and energy, some of the key areas that will be the focus of your discussions, rely on services provided by health and diverse ecosystems, and nature will play a critical role to combat the effects of climate change. Nonetheless, biodiversity loss and ecosystems degradation already affect the livelihood of billions of people. The impacts of climate change that are now collectively experiencing are also as a result of mismanaged natural capital and the exploitation of nature. Additionally, unsustainable interaction with nature can increase the risk of potential future pandemics. While 60% of non-infectious diseases and 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, the mismanagement of wildlife and their habitats contribute to the risks of emerging infectious diseases outbreaks. Repairing and reconciling our relationship with nature is one of the most secure, resilient, and sustainable solutions to the climate crisis. Conserving and restoring ecosystems and reversing the loss of biodiversity will lead to several multiple benefits, such as climate change mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, halting land desertification, and abating the conditions for the emergence of other zoonotic diseases. These nature-based solutions offer immediate and cost-effective benefits and carry great potential to take control of the global challenges we face. Moreover, One Health approach must be taken to promote sustainable, healthy, and just recovery from the pandemic. This approach recognizes the interconnections between human health and the health of our planet and can therefore strengthen the resilience of social, ecological, and economic systems. Several processes are already underway to secure and ensure the protection of nature. Negotiations under the Convention on Biological Diversity for a post-2020 global biodiversity framework will take place this year, with the preparatory work leading to the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to take place in Kunming, China in October. This new framework will remain and aim to be ambitious, inclusive, and holistic in scope so that together we can bend the curve of biodiversity loss. This year also marks an important milestone on nature. alongside its sister Rio conventions. The Convention on Biological Diversity will be an active partner under the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, which will catalyze action on reversing biodiversity loss and restoration of ecosystem with core benefits for climate change, human health, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me finish by recognizing all those who have and will participate in the various sessions throughout this Green Future Week. Your work is vital and will undoubtedly further the political momentum needed to transform our collective futures. Thank you.
The second message was sent by the Director General of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the world's largest environmental network founded in 1948 with a mandate to conserve natural resources and protect the environment.
Your Excellencies, partners, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege for IUCN to speak at the P4G Green Future session under the theme of Hope for the Future, Biodiversity Restoration. We are proud to count the Republic of Korea as a state member of IUCN and are grateful for our strong collaboration on environmental work such as in protected areas and marine and coastal protection. IUCN is thankful for the Republic of Korea's long leadership in nature conservation and the active promotion of its experience through programs such as the Forest Ecosystem Restoration Initiative. Such priorities align closely with IUCN goals. Since 1948, we have helped influence the world of biodiversity conservation and environmental sustainability, and today I'm proud to share our climate change and biodiversity programs that help achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This work should be seen through the lens of nature-based solution, a global concept driven by 10 years of IUCN leadership. Nature-based solutions are action to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystem. Crucially, this action addresses societal challenges effectively and adaptively, while benefiting human society and biodiversity at the same time. In terms of achieving climate action, Sustainable Development Goal 13 IUCN has been hugely successful through forest restoration. The Bond Challenge is the world's largest voluntary restoration movement to date. It aims to restore 350 million hectares of degraded and deforested landscape by 2030. We are well on track, with over 70 pledges for more than 60 countries now restoring 210 million hectares of degraded lands. Through this initiative, we are proud to work with countries such as El Salvador, which has committed to restore 1 million hectares of degraded land, half of its total land area. Another key IUCN program that contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals and biodiversity conservation is the Mangroves for the Future initiative. We began this initiative after the terrible damage caused to Southeast Asia's coastal communities and ecosystem in the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Through this program, IUCN has worked with 11 countries to restore and bring under sustainable management more than 13,000 hectares of mangroves and wetlands along 17,000 kilometers of coastline. And I'm very proud that the Mangroves for the Future initiative shows how biodiversity restoration can support multiple sustainable development goals. This program improved women's access to basic services through increased income and through income diversification. It also increased the security of local food system and strengthened community cohesion. This initiative contributes to Goal 1 on poverty, to Goal 5 on gender, to Goal 14 on ocean resources, and through regional cooperation, Goal 17 on global partnership. These are just two of the many successful IUCN programs that help build a more sustainable planet. But of course, we cannot talk about a better world without mentioning our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. As countries rebuild their societies and economies, they are allocating trillions of dollars to fiscal stimulus packages and developing longer-term economic recovery programs. Today's decision to help the world recover from the current pandemic will affect our future for decades to come. That is why IUCN has launched a nature-based recovery initiative, which aims to ensure two things. Firstly, we want to help government direct at least 10% of overall investment to nature. And second, economic investment post-COVID should do not additional harm to nature and livelihood. This initiative is now well underway, and we are inviting everyone to join us on this journey so that we can work together to truly embed sustainability within our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you both for your enlightening messages. It's always wonderful to have the rare opportunity to be joined by such special guests. So at this point in our program, we're going to move into the second part of our session, which is held with the scientific journal Nature. I'm sure you've probably heard of it, but Nature is the world's leading multidisciplinary scientific journal. First, here's a message from Magdalena Skipper, the editor-in-chief.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, distinguished fellow speakers, it is an honor to be taking part in this session entitled The Hope for the Future Biodiversity Recovery. The banner under which we are meeting today, Partnering for Growth and the Global Goals 2030, is right to put partnership first. While all eyes are on the pandemic, evidence-based decision-making is the only way forward worth considering. Governments that have closely followed research advice and in a timely manner have fared much better during this past year than those that did not. The same principle will apply to climate emergency, biodiversity loss, and the threat of poverty and hunger, and many others. Global crises have much in common, including that just as in the case of the pandemic, no one is really safe until everyone is safe. We would all agree that science and its practitioners from public and private sectors alike have a pivotal role in identifying solutions. But their success crucially depends on the support and encouragement to collaborate with other sectors, including the civil society. This support needs to extend to funding. Can we consider this not just an opportunity, but an obligation for funders to support and encourage science that is inclusive in terms of geography, culture, ethnicity, gender, and many other aspects of diversity? Perhaps more than ever before, now is the time for science to be transparent, for the knowledge to be shared equitably, so that all may benefit, but also importantly, so that all who have contributed receive appropriate credit. We all have a role to play in ensuring this. While pursuing answers to problems that face humanity and the planet, all too often we find ourselves going down the rabbit hole of country-level, at times nationalistic, rhetoric. Yes, global problems need local solutions, but we cannot afford to lose the global system-level perspective. And there are powerful examples of how local solutions, be it in city planning or in agriculture, solutions that involve bottom-up approaches, can successfully feed and inform policy making on a global scale. We are all in it together. Biodiversity loss, climate change, poverty are all global problems. Fortunately, science itself sets a great example for us all. Science is a global endeavor, Pursuit of knowledge and innovation knows no boundaries, and we should not try to impose them when none exists. Science without boundaries means free movement of scientists across the globe, so that international collaborations may flourish and knowledge may be freely exchanged towards a common good. It means data sharing without undue restrictions. It means financial support for international projects. Now is a time to focus especially on rewarding partnerships and projects that from the very inception are inclusive and collaborative, that bring together disparate disciplines and geographies. Scientific journals can provide a much-needed common platform for research from across disciplines, for bringing together researchers with policymakers, leaders of the business and financial world, as well as governmental and non-governmental organizations. We are offering a common platform for discourse that breaks the silos. Let me be clear. Calls for global solutions that are equitably distributed across the globe are not new. Yet here we are, coming together towards the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, calling for common, united, equitable solutions to our global problems. Hope for the future? There is no hope for the future without science at the very heart of global solutions and without partnerships. Science can deliver, but to do so, it must not happen in a proverbial ivory tower, isolated. Yes, science must reach out, but it also needs support from all other stakeholders so it can flourish unrestricted. Thank you.
Safeguarding biodiversity is one of the key elements of climate action and environmental protection. I look forward to seeing P4G, or Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030, deliver tangible solutions to restore biodiversity. With that in mind, we now move on to another discussion jointly organized by the Ministry of the Environment and the National Institute of Biological Resources and Nature under the theme Biodiversity Restoration as Seen by Natural Scientists.
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone who's joining us, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. My name is Tegan Amarego-Marriott. I'm an editor at Nature Climate Change, and I'm here to welcome you all to this our event, the P4G Nature Forum on Climate Change and Biodiversity. The event is brought to you as a partnership between our Nature Journal teams, specifically Nature Climate Change, Nature Reviews Earth and Environment, Nature Ecology Evolution, and Nature Communications, and the Republic of Korea's National Institute of Biological Resources, the NIBR, together with the APRU Sustainable Waste Management, Korea University, and the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Korea. Today, we're here to talk about biodiversity, the huge variety of life around us, with a focus on how climate change is threatening this biodiversity. To that end, we've invited experts in the field to introduce and then discuss this theme from several quite different angles. To initiate our talks today, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Yeon-Jae Bae. Yeon-Jae Bae has served as the 7th president of the NIBR since 2019. His research fields cover a variety of topics related to environmental entomology, including insect systematics and ecology, freshwater biology, aquatic entomology, and biodiversity conservation. Today, he will give us a very brief introduction to biodiversity and climate change. Thank you, Dr. Bae.
Good evening. Welcome to the P4G Nature Forum in collaboration with the 2021 P4G Summit, Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030. I would like to express my gratitude to speakers and panelists for giving presentations and sharing views with us. My thanks also go to those who are with us online. The theme of this forum is biodiversity restoration as seen by natural scientists. Now, the world is having a difficult time advancing sustainable development because of climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to express my deepest appreciation to the globally renowned scientific journal Nature for their contribution to human society through communication and dissemination of research results in natural sciences. Just like Nature has been playing a global leading role in research in natural sciences, the National Institute of Biological Resources, or NIBR, has been focusing on research on biodiversity and biological resources. In particular, NIBR has been conducting studies to restore biodiversity that has been damaged. Related research areas include biodiversity assessment and prediction about how biodiversity may change, support of the national climate change policy, and response to environmental issues caused by the impact of climate change on species. Nature and NIBR have a shared vision, which is sustainable development for people and nature through studies conducted in natural sciences. Under this vision, Nature and NIBR are holding this forum. Climate change and human activity have resulted in a decline in biodiversity. It is warned that biodiversity loss could pose a threat to our human survival. Unfortunately, this warning has become a reality. The emergence of COVID-19 has affected our lives for more than a year. Such diseases result from ecological imbalance caused by climate change and biodiversity loss. Therefore, we need to increase awareness of the coexistence of people and ecosystems. We need to think hard how to live in harmony with nature, and we need to put the solution into action. If we do so, biodiversity will absorb carbon and, in turn, to restore environmental degradation caused by climate change. This forum is significant as it will become a starting point where nature and NIBR can contribute together to the conservation and protection of biodiversity. I'm looking forward to making this forum meaningful for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that brilliant introduction. We'll now move on to the first of our guests, Professor Dolores Armenteras. Dolores is a professor of landscape ecology at the Universidad Nacional de Colombia, who has extensive expertise as a geographer and in biodiversity conservation. She's also one of the vice presidents of the International Association of Landscape Ecology and a member of the scientific panel for the Amazon. On that theme, today she will talk to us on the topic of the Amazon rainforest, explaining why conservation of this incredible region matters to all of us across the world. Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you for the organizers for inviting me today. It's always good to start with a reminder of being the Amazonia, one of the planet's best preserved forests, and that 50% of the tropical forests are in fact located in this part of South America. The Amazon forest is located within the territory of several nations, and it covers over almost 7.5 million square kilometers of the continents. Those nations share many common issues and share a common biome, but have different domestic particularities that we'll talk a little bit about them later. And yes, most of the Amazonia is within Brazil, around 62% of it, but it's also good to remember that the rest is distributed among several other nations, 8 other nations, in fact. In extension, Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia follow Brazil, but overall, 38% of the territory is in other countries outside Brazil. Beyond political borders, it's important to mention that the Amazon has been considered by many as the biological heart of the planet. And indeed, is one of the largest and most intact forests in the world, right? But over 10% of known plant and animal species live here, or more than 10% of known species are located in the Amazon. It also has the highest number of species per area in many taxonomic groups, and we're talking about more than 50,000 vascular plants, over 1,500 species of birds, over 400 species of mammals, from predators, right, to primates, anteaters. The largest living species of armadillo lives in the Amazon. Wild boars, non-flying mammals, small rodents. And one of the biggest herbivores in the Amazonia, one species of tapir, lives here, is a terrestrial species that loves water and even has a kind of a snorkel in the snout. But a truly aquatic species are 3 species of freshwater dolphins that inhabit this territory, and 1 manatee. Beyond that, I mean, there's over 400 species of amphibians, almost 400 species of reptiles, and around 2,400, some people say 3,000 species of fishes. That some species have incredible migratory behavior and move along the entire length of the Amazon basin, up to even, I don't know, 12,000 square kilometers, and very important for food security of local communities. The Amazonia also holds a tremendous cultural diversity, with human presence documented since the Holocene. 3 million of indigenous amongst 35 million people live today in the Amazon currently. Spoken more than 300 indigenous language and at least 350 different ethnic groups. But the Amazon is not only a collection of biological and cultural diversity, it helps regulate the entire planet atmosphere and also the water cycle on a regional and global scale. In a way, it has a cooling role, sucks the moisture of the air and move it along the plants, through the plants before returning it to the atmosphere. So in a way, it creates the often called flowing rivers in the sky that eventually fall as rain in a cycle. And almost 20% of the global water circulation goes through this process. This is, in a sense, if you talk about mature trees, they say, scientists, colleagues say that it can filter up to 1,000 liters of water per day, or the equivalent of 3 bathtubs per day. So you can imagine the importance of every single tree in the Amazon. Further, around 20% of the global ocean freshwater discharge comes from the Amazon. In the terrestrial realm, in terms of other important cycles, indeed, trees also absorb or capture CO2 and fix carbon in the biomass, in the soil, as well as relieve oxygen whilst doing this carbon fixation. So the Amazon is really a key player in this sense for the global planet. But the Amazon also faces many threats, and I have to talk about them. I cannot talk about biodiversity without talking about the threats. And perhaps the one better known is deforestation, because it has been a major problem, right? And it's perhaps the one better known and all over the world and in the media. Over 1 million square kilometers of forests have been already deforested or lost since the mid-80s. With up and downs, with different rates in different countries, but most countries' deforestation rates have gone up since a couple of years ago again. So it's a really worrying situation because there's a lot of forests being lost. But to the forest loss, we also have to add another almost 400,000 square kilometers of forests that are becoming degraded. And what does that mean? Degraded forests are those forests that from being kind of healthy, they become what is called degraded in a sense that they lose cover, they have less trees, they have less animals, and they lose the capacity of doing all these things and preserving and hosting all the biodiversity I was telling you about. Deforestation and degradation happen due to many things. Fires is one of them, one of the reasons why this happens, and often is used to clear the land, but also selective logging or illicit crops. Many countries still face the problem of illicit crops, particularly in the northwestern part of the Amazonia. And aquatic ecosystems also face different or similar threats in terms of, for instance, illegal mining activities, illegal gold minings in the riverbed, or with illegal dredges in the river. And also the development of poorly planned oil-related transportation and infrastructure, it threatens these aquatic ecosystems. Or the construction of dams, it might be a threat in many cases. Not sure if you can imagine a dolphin jumping up those doors. So it's really disrupting the functioning of the whole system. And there's no single explanation, and I'm sure my colleagues will later on talk about them, of what drives changes in the Amazon. Parts can be found in the demand for agricultural products, a demand that can be national, but often is driven by big agribusinesses. And indeed, international markets have a say. And again, I'm sure we'll have more discussion about this later on, but this is an example of the beef supply chain from Brazil. And you can see it reaches many places over the world. Or the example of palm oil in Colombia, from Colombia, or the palm oil from Brazil that has different markets than the one that I've just shown you from Colombia. Further, there is this irresistible market demand that pushes for land grabbing. The future prospect of using land for future investments is a motivation. The thing is that, for instance, this magazine cover from National Geographic is from 2007, and this is still happening, and particularly in many countries more than others. So somehow what was meant to be the future has become the present, and is a problem that is still going on. And in that sense, another aspect is that the land property is extremely unequally distributed. Land inequality reaches extremes of 85% or more of land is in the hands of 1% of the owners. So this brings a lot of inequilibrium in the system. And why is all this important? The thing is that the impacts are enormous, and yes, go from local to global. Human well-being is compromised. We're talking not only of health of local populations. It's really easy perhaps to imagine respiratory diseases due to forest fires that are close to where people live, or people living nearby the forest that gets burned. You can imagine the smoke. But forest fires really emit large quantities of smoke, particulate matter, and other pollutants that go into the atmosphere and eventually degrade air quality in many other places and globally as well. So it is a problem, but we are also talking about long-term human health, all negative effects, especially among vulnerable groups, particularly women and children tend to be, but also the risk of food security problems, violence and social disruption. And indeed, the risk for emergent diseases that my colleague Professor Kate Jones will talk about later. So globally, there are also impacts, other impacts to consider. We must take into account that the more burning, the more trees are converted into CO2 or are damaged by the fire, right? And eventually die. And in both cases, the end result is releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. So there's a consequence of that, because the the less trees that exist mean less carbon fixed, but also less water pumped into the atmosphere. And then rainfall decreases and temperatures will rise. And this happens both regionally, but also it has implications globally. So there are more floodings in some areas, and droughts increase in terms of length, frequency, and even the intensity. And the more droughts, the more wildfires, and all this is a very problematic, vicious cycle we can talk about. And with that, I just want to leave you with a quote from Brazilian journalist Eliane Brum. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that incredible and also very beautiful talk showing importance and also the perils that are facing the Amazon and also us globally. You mentioned at the end of your talk the link to human disease. So that's a great way for us to move on to our next speaker, Professor Kate Jones. Kate is a professor of ecology and biodiversity in the Department of Genetics, Evolution and Environment at University College London. She's a world-leading ecologist whose work focuses on breaking down traditional disciplinary boundaries to address critical global challenges, especially at the interface of ecological and human health. She's made key advances in the understanding of how diseases like Ebola and SARS reached human populations. And today we'll talk on this broader topic, understanding why diseases jump from animals into humans.
Okay, so my research really unpicks the links between the health of our environment and human health and understands how people and nature can live together more sustainably. So I particularly focus on infectious diseases, especially the ones which jump from animals into humans. And I think you've had close personal experience of one of these, so that's like COVID, for example. And I think I'd like to show you this slide because it gives you an idea of the substantial shift in the global community that's happened over the last few years, decade or so, on the recognition of the critical dependencies on ecosystems, on our health, our well-being, and our economies. And environmental risks have always been in the top five of these risks. But in the last year or so, in 2020, they they had the dubious honor of reaching being all top 5 risks in the world. And this isn't just me saying it as an ecologist. These are some finance leaders, global leaders from the World Economic Forum that are showing these problems. And in 2021, a new thing came up, and that was infectious diseases. And I'm going to spend my talk trying to argue here that there's actually a link between how we treat our environment and the infectious diseases which emerge into human populations. So this issue of why and how COVID emergence happened is a top issue across the world and is the subject of many raging headlines and reports that have been published recently. And these reports, interestingly, started to talk about how the COVID pandemic was really linked to how we treat our environment. But if you just stop and think about that for a minute, we are destroying nature, which means that we're reducing the number of wildlife populations on the planet, we're reducing the number of animals. And so if we're having fewer animals, then we should be having fewer diseases. So how does this work? And I think to understand this, I want to kind of step back a little bit and go through some of the background. So the majority of infectious diseases of humans are from animals. They have an animal origin or are spread by animals. So they're either zoonotic or vector-borne. And there's not a decreasing amount of infectious diseases in humans, there's an increasing amount. And so our best estimates think that the number of infectious diseases emerging into the human population are increasing. Okay, so our best estimates, really, our best knowledge, really thinks about it like this. All species on the planet have pathogens, like we all have pathogens, and this is a little Venn diagram from Paper in Science around, domestic animals, wildlife, and humans. And really, the pathogens jump from different categories when something changes, like the pathway of transmission between these animals changes. So something like global travel or urbanization or encroachment into wild areas. But we're disrupting these ecosystems on a massive scale across our planet. There are more people, we're building more homes, bigger cities, bigger roads, we're changing the climate, we're farming more and different crops. And this has caused our ecosystems to degrade. And so this is causing these transmission pathways to change as well. But disrupting ecosystems has a really interesting effect on the species which are present. So disrupting ecosystems doesn't just mean that randomly you take out some species like this butterfly and this frog. It has a kind of sequence to it. And so it really depends on the life histories, the kind of way of life of those different species. So some species fall out really quickly when you disrupt an ecosystem. So here you've got intensification of human pressure along the bottom. And then we have low pressure on the left-hand side and high pressure on the right-hand side. And some species are not bothered. Some species are very affected. And some species love these new amazing environments that we've created on the planet. So disrupting ecosystems changes the species which are present, and they become, and they really like these areas and become at high densities and large numbers. So in a study from my group last year, we tried to think about what this meant globally. Was there a relationship between the species which can survive in these degraded landscapes and the probability of having an emerging disease into the human population? And amazingly, we looked at a huge number of studies, over nearly 7,000 across the world, and found out that yes, on the whole, if you degrade ecosystems, you change the ecosystems into species which have a higher probability of hosting and then possibly transmitting a pathogen into human populations. So how does this, what does this mean for like stopping the next pandemic? So how do we stop the next COVID-19? How do I get an invitation to Korea to actually be in person rather than in my living room? So I tend to think about it like this, and I think we should be starting to think about whole systems here. So firstly, we have the kind of ecological part of the model, the hazard. So what is the hazard? How does the host respond to change? Where does it live? What does it do? How does it respond to the environment in total? Then you've got something about the human, what are they doing? What behaviors do they have? What practices are they doing across their culture? How are they exposing themselves to the hazard? And then we have to add in vulnerability. How vulnerable, as Dolores was just saying, how vulnerable are these populations? And then we can come up with some idea of overall risk. Now, this is a systems dynamic framework. And so land use change and climate change act on every single part of this system. So if we have a chance of actually understanding infectious disease risk and how ecosystems are changing to promote or decrease the amount of risk, we need to think about it in this kind of systems approach and really, really need to embed our understanding of the ecology into our risk programs and policies that we think about to manage risk. So just to finish then, I want to just highlight the role of ecology here and biodiversity in addressing these societal problems. And I'm sure Professor Gretchen Daly will be talking about this a bit more in her talk, but these are kind of this idea that ecosystems and managing ecosystems creates these solutions to our societal problems. And I think that disease and infectious disease emergence is a really nice example of what happens when we don't live with nature and we exploit nature. Thanks very much.
We are now going to move on straight to our next speaker, who is Professor Gretchen Daly. Gretchen is the director of the Center of Conservation Biology in Stanford University, co-founder and faculty director of the Stanford Natural Capital Project, and a senior fellow at the Woods Institute for the Environment. Reflecting on her expertise in the fields of policy, finance, and management of natural resources, today she will talk to us on the financial side of biodiversity conservation. Thank you, Gretchen.
The topic is a very scary one that we all live with. However, we're experiencing environmental destruction in many different ways. I'm here in California now, and it's been terrifying living through the fires that might come again this summer. and that have been intensifying over, the past decades. But wherever we live, we experience different types of destruction. And this question has been burning in my mind since I was a little girl. I grew up in partly West Germany, where acid rain was a big problem. And it's amazing how long this struggle is playing out and how difficult it is to develop ways to stop destruction. But we have had successes. In the case of acid rain, for example, there has been great success in reducing and even stopping the problem in some places. So what I'd like to do is acknowledge the severity of the problems and at the same time offer a view to some of the solutions that are beginning to gain traction and scale successfully. So first of all, we really need, as Professor Armenteras and Jones both emphasized, a real shift in our mindset. We need to understand humanity as very much embedded in the web of life. And we need to begin to see nature not as a cost, but rather as an engine of prosperity, as the system within which we derive many, many dimensions of our well-being. So with that shift, one way to pursue change in the way people think, in the way our systems operate, our financial systems, our governance systems, our decision-making, is to recognize nature as a type of asset, a natural capital sort of asset. That doesn't mean that the values are small or connected with a particular, governance system, but rather that nature is a major asset for all of us dependent on the services that come for water security, food security, climate security, all the other types of security that we've been talking about in health, in livelihoods, and so on. So what is natural capital with this kind of view? It's referencing just the total sum of Earth's lands, waters, and their biodiversity, as we've just been discussing together. And it's basically what should be the focus of investment and regeneration in order to maintain these many dimensions of security for humanity and for the planet. So one way to look at this question then is, well, where and how much should we protect, looking at the vast landscapes that people now so dominate across the planet? Where do we draw the lines, and how do we drive inclusive and green pathways of economic development? How can we make conservation and regeneration profitable? How can we make this approach fundamental to the way we think about human development and economic development? And then finally, how do we then guide and track progress? Well, to answer these questions, we need to bring the types of science that the group of us is presenting here to make it much more accessible and much more actionable. And one way in which a large part of the community has done so is to bring the science into a data and software platform. This is a free and open source platform to which hundreds, and I think now, well over 1,000 scientists have contributed to understand where and how much we need to protect in order to secure these different types of benefits, many types of benefits shown here. The platform and this software is now used in most countries to some degree, and in some countries it's really taking off as a way of guiding investment, whether across large landscapes, or in cities, increasingly with the data we have and the understanding, especially in this pandemic time, of how much we depend on nature, living in cities and experiencing an absence of nature in trying to maintain our physical activity, our physical and mental health, cognitive functioning, and emotional well-being. There's ever more of a sense of the need for nature. So using this platform together with all the technology, bringing in data streams, and then really interacting with decision makers, we are seeing a shift, a promising shift in the kind of pathways and directions we need. So I'll give you a few examples very quickly from Latin America and from Asia. And the first I want to show you concerns water security, where downstream users, whether in industry, just living in cities, in agricultural production, in energy generation, we often depend on water from places far, far away. And so here, actually showing different parts of the Andean region, including in Colombia, much of the water comes from, hundreds or more kilometers away, from very different cultures and societies, speaking different languages and with very different livelihoods. And there's a movement now to recognize this dependence or interdependence and invest in the livelihoods and activities of people in the source areas for water. And then it opens the question, well, how should those investments be targeted? What kinds of activities? Should it be protection of forest in the upper parts of watersheds? Should it be regeneration of forest, or just improvement of agricultural practices and keeping livestock away from waterways, for example? And where in these huge, many thousands or even millions of square kilometers, where should these protection investments be made? So with this type of approach, we can really see, looking here, for example, in the Cauca Valley in Colombia, with many different watersheds in purple, feeding different cities, such as this one here. We can see in the watershed, where to make investments and what types of investments to make in protecting forest, in reforesting along rivers and streams, in adding trees to pasture areas, or fencing, or understory plant diversity where you have livestock concentrated to help improve the security of people in terms of health and water supply, the even flow of water around the year downstream in cities. And so this approach allows you even to estimate at different budget levels, different investment levels, what the improvement in water quality and security would be in different dimensions. This approach is now being taken up in many places. Colombia is one of the real leading places, together with Ecuador. And this shows different agreements, water funds in different stages of implementation across South America and then further north. And we see across Latin America today, there are about 55 of these water funds, agreements between downstream consumers and upstream suppliers with an ever more standardized approach. And this is also being taken up widely now across Asia and increasingly in Africa. It's being financed by public-facing financial institutions like the Inter-American Development Bank. This is the former president of the bank, the former president of the Nature Conservancy, helping to scale this approach across Latin America. And what I'd like to show you now very briefly are two other examples, much more quickly. The first in the Caribbean, looking at coastal climate risks and resilience with ever increasing severity and frequency of storms. We're developing software that's now being taken up across Latin America and the Caribbean to show the hazard, low and blue to very high hazard, along different low-lying coastlines. And then using, technology, we can track the risk in real time, look exactly at where to improve habitats to help secure people and property from climate risk. And here, working with the Prime Minister's office in the Bahamas, making a development plan that integrates these investments, and same across Belize, in many different sectors, from shipping, fishing, oil and gas, offshore and onshore development, tourism, trying to take a harmonious approach and planning across these many different sectors, where to protect and how to integrate into a sustainable development plan. So based on success in these two initial countries, the Inter-American Development Bank is also approaching all of its member countries and scaling and helping to fund these sorts of development pathways and this sort of regeneration of coral reefs and mangrove systems. The final example is across Asia. There are more and more countries systematizing natural capital accounting and quantifying, here shown for China, for example, the specific ecosystems where we are getting food security, climate sequestration and security, and many other types of security provided by ecosystems, allowing us to determine the importance of different parts and to zone land. In China, about 50% of land is zoned for ecosystem protection to provide these benefits shown here and many other benefits at local levels. About 200 million people are now being paid to restore natural capital. And a lot of this is being guided through a new metric called gross ecosystem product that is developed alongside gross domestic product and reveals, bringing in all these data using ways of valuing natural capital like Invest to show the contribution of ecosystems to the economy and society, to guide financial compensation, such as we need to protect the Amazon and other places, and to look at and evaluate performance of policies and leaders. And this was now recently approved by the UN Statistical Commission for global use. Well, this is being scaled across China, I should say, at every level of governance. And then Colombia is the first next country to participate in advancing this type of accounting and the use of this GEP to help guide investments and move these investments onto a much more sustainable development path. And the Inter-American Development Bank is supporting this. The next countries are coming from Asia. These are being decided upon, but several countries in Southeast Asia and then across Central and South Asia similarly will be supported by the Asian Development Bank in guiding these investments. So just to close, we need much more leadership from the financial sector. The UK is also more and more involved with the Treasury and a Natural Capital Committee, and Professor Partha Dasgupta's review on the economics of biodiversity, but all of this building momentum that we need to capitalize on for mainstreaming these approaches and targeting policies and investment that use the kind of data and science that we're all bringing to our conversation today, that integrate across sectors, across many different types of development objectives, including equity and inclusion, and the many types of benefits we need to help scale and accelerate this approach. And I'll thank you again very much there and turn over to the discussants. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing talk, Gretchen. And thank you, in fact, to all of our experts for the wonderful introduction to these topics, which I think have really showed how both the climate and biodiversity crises that we're experiencing right now are such multifaceted issues that affect people all across the world in very diverse ways. I think you've managed in a very short time to communicate the complexity of both the causes and the solutions of these crises, so thank you. I'd like to move on now to our discussion panel so that I have a chance to ask our experts some burning questions. And to go on to the discussion panel, I would like to first welcome two other experts who will join us now. So Young-Sik Ok is a full professor at Korea University and program director for the APRU Sustainable Waste Management Program. I would also welcome Dr. Jae-Shin Kang. Jae-Shin Kang is a director of the Microorganism Resources Division at NIBR under the Ministry of Environment, Korea. And I know that Jae-Shin has a burning question for Kate Jones, so I would love to start with her question.
Thank you, Tegan. Actually, it was a great honor to hear the three excellent, presentation. As our president of NIBR, Dr. Yeon Jae-bal, has already mentioned in the, what is welcome address, the NIBR has been focusing on the research on biodiversity and biological resources. So I also believe that the important function of NIBR is to create scientific information to understand and to use the species properly. So, okay, that is my question. Whenever we come across the word biodiversity over the past few decades, we also come across the problem of unsustainable resources use, invasive species, pollution, global climate change, etc. at the same time. So, however, I think, we learned that human can also be a threatened species in the era of COVID-19. So my recent concern is whether important issues such as biodiversity conservation are being put off to the next. So perhaps, the best safeguard to conserve biodiversity is to raise our public awareness. So I would like to ask to Dr. Kate Jones, in the post-COVID-19 era, I wonder if it is appropriate for the biodiversity conservation strategy to be promoted the same way as it is now, or if some supplements are needed.
Thank you very much for your question. That's really interesting. I think I tried to make the case that the biodiversity loss is really linked to COVID-19, and also this isn't going to be the only one that we are experiencing, and there are going to be more. So I think we need to think of it not just as biodiversity on one side and humans on the other. We're all part of the system, and I think I think maybe the world is waking up to that fact, and people are changing their minds about that, and understanding that systems thinking, that we're part of nature, and the things, our actions have consequences. And I think that I have been more encouraged over the last decade than I have ever in my career about what's changing. And Professor Daly talks about natural capital committees and the focus on natural capital, nature-based solutions. And I think that's really encouraging. And I think we're starting to see a change, I hope anyway, a change in our relationship to nature.
Thank you, both of you. I wonder if I could kind of ask a similar question about solutions to Dolores. So you talked specifically about the Amazon and how important it is, but also how we have all of these different threats that are coming at the Amazon right now. So I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but if we have to talk about solutions, if you had just one or two things that you think are the most important to help save this region, could you give us some examples?
Yes, sure, particularly because pure conservation hasn't worked and pure development, the way it has been working, hasn't worked either. So there has to be a middle ground pathway somewhere. Perhaps if one or two solutions could be the solution, which they are not, is a complex system, like Kate was saying. The sustainable activity, I mean, anything that is not sustainable has to be taken out of the Amazon, and meaning we have to find ways of developing sustainable activities, a sustainable economy with the standing forests. I mean, we cannot take the luxury of losing more standing forests in the Amazon. That's a global thing. I mean, it's a luxury. And the other thing, we have to find also the sustainable management of the river, because the river, all the rivers in the Amazon basin, I mean, it's part of the system. I mean, one thing doesn't go with the other. It's not only the terrestrial, it's an integrated system. So it's a whole way of managing it together. And I just want to make a point, which is this inequality. Inequality is in many aspects, and having financial and investment without a proper policy governance and policy leaderships and innovation by the private sector as well. I mean, I'm not saying that nobody has a role. I think we all have a role, but we have to find a way where we can balance and not have the luxury. And the inequality that we are seeing with the vaccines in the world is widening the global inequalities. And it's a system that is structurally wrong. And those of us that live in less privileged countries are suffering more the impacts of something that Kate was telling about. So I think this is very important, that we find a way to be aware, really aware, not just lip service, is that you say in English? Not lip service, no greenwashing, no labels. I mean, this is time to act.
Thank you for bringing up that very, very important point. And I think this actually very nicely kind of shifts into a question of responsibility, where there's the role of the private citizen, the governments, the consumers, and of course also of businesses in our whole control of the biodiversity and climate crises. So I think I would like to ask Young-Sik to ask a question to Gretchen on the topic of the role of businesses and their investments.
Thank you, Tegan. So let me ask you just one question. So with the increased interest in UN SDG, particularly nowadays in our country, so sustainable finance approach have grown rapidly, as you know. So recently, market participants, including various institutional and private investors, are paying attention to ESG, environmental, social, and governance, investing approach with the ambition of making their investment more sustainable and toward a low carbon transition. So the environment pillar at ESG is important in capturing the negative effect of business activity on the environment, including carbon emission, waste generation, natural resource utilization and depletion, and climate change related risk to business growth. So I have quite big question to Professor Gretchen Daly. So could you please share your insight on e-scoring as a tool for foreseeing and making business portfolio more resilient to biodiversity and climate transition risk? Thank you.
You've raised a really crucial point. So thank you very much for that. There's an enormous role for the private sector, and especially, broadly in business and in finance here. We're all in this together, and if we don't engage effectively and fully and powerfully, we will all see the end of the world together. So the ESG framework is a really good framework in aspiration, but so far it has not delivered enough. You know, there's not enough participation, there's not enough visibility of the impacts and dependence of private sector entities and all of us as private consumers There's not enough visibility of our impacts and our dependence on nature, on a stable climate system. There's not enough traceability to let us see where we're getting our consumption from, what we're purchasing, and what practices were involved in creating the products that we're consuming. We need much more accountability to make all of this visible and hold all of us in the system accountable. So I would say that there is a lot more discussion of this, but whether we actually see change remains unclear. There's some places where there's some really compelling leadership, but not nearly enough. We need much more bold and transformative shifts in what the private sector as a whole system is doing. And I think it's too easy today to make some statements, but not really do anything. So I'm a little bit worried about where we're heading, but I do feel there is a framework, and I'm hopeful that with the public sector leadership, say of these development banks, which in the past did do a lot to destroy the planet and still are, but they are really shifting, and I'm hoping that the shift will continue. Thank you.
While I do have you here, Young-Shik, I would like to ask you a question, because although we have a global audience today, this is also a Korean event, and I think it would be remiss of me to not take advantage of your own expertise and unique perspective. So I would like you to say very, very quickly, what do you feel are the major concerns for biodiversity and climate, and the biggest barriers for conservation from the Korean perspective?
Thank you, Taegan. I guess that's a really difficult question for me to answer, but just upon my knowledge, according to our Ministry of Environment, Korea has decreased forest by over 2%, farmland by over 16%, and tidal flood by over 20% over the past 20 years. And accordingly, new policies are being implemented to reflect the conservation of biodiversity. So our government is supporting agriculture, forestry, and fisheries to operate in a sustainable way. So our country's national biodiversity strategic and action plan, it's called as MBSAP, is a legal strategy for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable use of its element, so which is established every 5 years and approved by cabinet. So I think currently our country is in the process of implementing the fourth MBSAP from 2019 to 2023. So as you just mentioned, to increase public awareness, the government planned to develop a biodiversity education program to reflect in the school curriculum by year 2023. So there need to be a greater collaboration between various ministries. I mean, among different ministries could be led by our Ministry of Environment and responsible for preservation of biodiversity, as well as stronger public-private partnership to help implement our government's national biodiversity strategy and action plan. So finally, I'd like to just suggest to coordinate effort among government agency and between the government and private sector so that our country's biodiversity resource can be adequately protected as suggested by Professor Gretchen Daly. Thank you.
Thank you. Collaboration, coordination, and education, all very important. So thank you for raising those points. I am very conscious of time. So although I would love to ask you all many other questions, I would like to just quickly ask Dolores, Gretchen, and Kate to sort of give a final message to everyone. So if there's one take-home message that you would like our audience to get based on what you've said today and what has been said today, could you please share that with us in as short a time as possible? So we'll start with Kate, thanks.
Oh, thank you. That's a hard question. So I think the one take-home message would be, the roots of our current crisis are about destruction of nature and our unhealthy relationship with nature. And we need transformative change, not just from governments, but from you watching. You need to lobby your government and create the change that needs to happen. Thank you.
Dolores, could I put the same question to you now?
Sure, and to add to Kate, I'm going to go to my last slide, a quote that I left there. We all have a role, and I think we have to be, wherever you are, whatever you do, you have to be aware, you have to be active, and you have to be responsible. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And Gretchen?
I feel I couldn't say it any better than these two. It's funny, I had the same thoughts in my mind, I guess, from hearing you before me, but we need to value nature in all of the decisions that we make. And to do that, there is hope, there is action, and there is very much a role for everybody. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you so much to all of you. That was a very powerful ending to today's event. I would like to make a huge thank you to our experts who shared their time with us, and thank you to all of our partners and to everyone who joined us from across the world, particularly those who joined very early in the morning or later at night. So thank you all and goodbye.
Thank you everyone all around the world who joined in with us today on this session. I hope the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit will produce concrete results, and today's session will be a good starting point in taking action toward the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. The Ministry of Environment and the National Institute of Biological Resources will also step up their efforts to this end. Thank you very much.